Oh, hey, there we go. Is it working? Humans, hey, they're a thing. Yeah, so, I think it was last year, but, when you get to my age, you forget what year is what year, I don't even remember my kids' names anymore. So this is a sort of a merge of really two presentations. So when I gave this sort of abstract, I actually had started working on another presentation about talent systems. In other words, you can do AI all day long. You can have strategies. You can have innovation strategies. If you don't understand your talent, it ain't going to work. So I kind of merged the two because I promised you to do rogue agents. But so in my mind, it's a little jaggedy. Hopefully for you, it won't be. I've done a lot of things. Most of you sort of know. I've spoken here in the gracious invitation many times here, so I love coming here. Berlin seems like one of the most awesome cities in the world. Done a lot of things, so there we go. But I'm more interested in what I do now. People ask me what I am. I think I start with I'm an author. For those of you who know me, I've done like 12 startups. I sold the company to Dell. I sold the company to Docker. I won't go through my 45 years of all this nonsense, and then I think second, being an author, I'm a researcher, so I really like, and I'll say lowercase R, researcher, and then I do actually try to make a little bit of money periodically as an advisor, but most people know me from the DevOps Handbook, and so that's sort of my, I should have started my timer. So I co-authored DevOps. I'm kind of considered the founder of DevOps. It's pretty accurate. My last two books, I've written like 14 books, but my last 2 books ago, I wrote a book about Dr. Deming. If you ever want to talk about him, please, I'll talk all day. But my last book is Rebels of Reason, and it's a 100-year history of AI. It's sort of like, if you know Michael Lewis, how he would write a book about the history of AI. I don't give away books anymore because people don't read. So I'm selling books. My son over here will have a little booth. And it's really, I just do author cost, but I'm just tired of giving people books and seeing them laying around on tables and chairs after the conference. So I decided I'm just going to sell books. And I figured if you're going to pay $20 for a book, you're probably going to read it. This was interesting. This came out, I did this, like I said, is a merge of this presentation of something I did last week in Montreal, which is this idea about innovation and talent system strategy gaps. So that's not the title of this one. But it's kind of funny, right? Like where we're at right now is like everything's AI. It was screaming and hollering. Everybody's bouncing off the walls. And I was concerned about this a couple of years ago. Not that I'm like some brilliant guy. Because you know what it is? If you take the word DevOps, I'm the O in DevOps. Been that person my whole career. I love operations and infrastructure. And as I've gotten older, I reflect on like, what is ops? What do ops people do? And ultimately, cut to the chase, we protect the brand. That's what we do, right? We figure out, so we get excited about the technology, just like all the developers, and then we step back and say, "Ooh, wait a minute. What can go wrong here?" Anyway, this is part of what's going wrong, right? Like the coffee machine's not working. The obvious fix is to fix the coffee machine. Maybe even get a new coffee machine, but hey. But then what do we do? Like we create these like boardrooms of like, and like you're seeing this now. People are literally building these whole scaffolding of organizational structures now around problems like, did you really need to AI that? And so like where we're at right now. So I'm going to get to the rogue part. It's embedded here, but I want to talk about like what's going on right now. You talked about what I said 2 years ago, right? Like then I was like, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's pretty scary. Now I kind of see what's happening, and I'm really scared. And here's the thing: I'm not anti-AI. I've done more research. I've done more coding than I've done like in my 40 years in the last like 2 years. I'm fearless, Rust, go. I don't get out of the way, right? I don't care, right? Like, and that's something I hadn't really been, right? I'm an old assembler program, right? But like, what's going on? Like the sticker shock, right? This was 2 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal is talking about token economics. Things have gone haywire, right? In fact, I wrote an article recently called Token Schizophrenia. 3 or 4 years ago, our leaders were saying, don't use AI. Then they were like, why are you not using AI? And now they're like asking you to write white papers on why you're spending so much money on AI, right? And so so I don't know if you have heard, but Uber, and these are the guys that should know what they're doing. They've been doing ML way longer than most of us, not all of you, but, and like Uber ran out of their token budget or AI budget in April, right? Amazon, like in their brilliance, sorry, I love Amazon, but like when you're stupid, you do something stupid, you deserve to be called out. They created a token leaderboard. If your company has a token leaderboard, like run into your CEO and say, stop now. Well, you're telling people to unabashedly just spend money. Like, and they scrapped, and kind of incidentally, later on, we'll see maybe there's a slide where some company, we don't know who, had a $500 million a month budget for Claude Code. Now, at that same time, Amazon stopped their token leaderboard. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. They're not saying who that company is. Why now? There's the thing, like we're at this sort of inflection point in technology. Like I said, I've been doing this 5 decades. 5 decades I've been playing around with this nonsense. We're at this weird inflection point now. And like, I thought a week and a half ago when I gave my presentation, we were at a sort of pinnacle of an inflection point. And then what happened? Fable 5 came out, and then it got pulled off. Like, inflection point squared, right? It's definitely, and the blast radius is what I'm concerned about, right? Because, again, that O in the operations of practical land, I'm worried about the blast radius, and I'll talk a little more on this. And part of this is this allure. I call it the fluorescence of what's going on now, right? We get blinded by, like, all this. I mean, it is incredible. I got a friend that literally, Fidelity. He's a chief architect, one of the chief architects of Fidelity. Fidelity manages 16 trillion in assets, okay? Like, if you add up the first United States GDP, it's about 16 trillion. Depending on whose math you do, China is about 17 or 18 trillion, right? This one company has 16 trillion in assets. Topo last November gave a presentation to how he wrote a project, he built a project that his team told him would take 8 months, wrote it in a week, put it in production. Now, it wasn't like touching that 16 trillion assets, but a place like Fidelity doesn't put anything into production willy-nilly. So the idea that this easier to start makes it easier to think you're done. And even worse, all right, this is the part where I stand up for an audience, and I love this because I just love this. It's 2026, and I still have to say to you, prototype does not equal production. It's sort of embarrassing as an industry, I have to say that, but like that's the reality, folks. We have this. What's going on? My screen's going. I mean, there's this idea that AI is failing. It's like, it's the famous quote: the future's here. It's just it's not equally distributed, right? That's where we're at right now, right? There is this notion of failure. There's this notion of, in general, I think this gentleman said it best. I saw this yesterday. I'm terrible at just throwing in slides. He's like, it's unbelievable. It's better than everything. It's just, oh, wait, that's not really what's happening. Now, again, the good news is there's phenomenal things going on right now. One of the things that makes me sound smart is my best friends are really freaking smart, right? You want to be really smart, hang out with people 10 times smarter than you and convince them that you're smart enough to talk to them. And then you literally get to learn a ridiculous amount of stuff. Right? And, but the people I know are doing incredible stuff right now. Now, are we scaling? Are we doing it at an organizational level in a sort of competent manner? No. And that's the part I get concerned about. Right? So there's this idea of like, I think people must look at technology. I told you I've been doing this 5 decades. Most people look at, technology transformations as these sort of S-curves, right? This sort of, the classic diffusion of innovation, right? The truth is they're J-curves. And what we're in right now is the sort of the belly of the J-curve, right? And so it's failing, maybe. But by the way, did we learn anything from DevOps? What did it teach us? It taught us that failure is learning. So we're in a learning cycle. Now the question is your organization structured, as a good friend of mine says, to create a slingshot to come out of the J-curve? And that's the core of my sort of last week's presentation is, are you creating, like, do you know that this is not failure or it's failure is learning, so I'm going to be in here? And, like you said earlier in the introduction, is we are in, we're learning right now. And even what we thought a year ago is really not necessarily true right now, right? And the pattern is over and over. So this is another sort of good news, bad news. The bad news is, depending on whether you consider things good or bad, but the bad news is that this is definitely unique. And it's very rarely that I stand on stage and say that, because I've seen this for 5 decades, so I'm like, yeah, you kids think this is new, but like serverless was a good example, right? But this time I'm like maybe it's the fluorescence and I'm being fooled as well. There is something unique about this time. I mean, again, like the Mythos, Fable 5, I'm looking forward to your presentation. The Mythos and Fable 5 craziness just happened last week is, enough to say, yeah, this is totally crazy steroids. So the patterns that we learn from DevOps, and what we learn from DevOps, if you know anything about me, I'm a big fan of Dr. Deming, and what Dr. Deming taught us basically 50 years ago about organizations and how people work together. So there's the new stuff that's really scary, there's the new stuff that's incredibly awesome, and there's the old stuff that we gotta figure out how to make it work together. Because it's still about people and technology, right? And I'm going to skip the burnout. Not that I don't think burnout is one of the most important, but you'll get the slides. I think we are in a new stage of burnout, too. I mean, the depersonalization, there's something called the MBI. Again, if you've ever followed me, I spent a lot of years keynoting about the dangers of burnout in our industry. Christina Maslach was the expert. She created the canonical psychometric survey for it. I mean, if you looked at the MBI, it's made of exhaustion, cynicism, and efficacy. I don't have to go too deep to explain how those things are being affected by AI. And then there's the way of the organization. I talked about, the talent system. So I don't care. Most executives right now are concerned about their talent. Are we smart enough to do it? Do we got to bring in consultants to help us? This is so nonsensical right now. This is true story. I was at DevOps Days LA Scale, one of the biggest local Linux conferences in the US and the world. And there were consultants now that are getting brought in by CIOs that they don't let their architects and developers touch the keyboard because these are token economic experts. So they literally pair with and I'm not making this shit up. They literally pair with the people they've trusted in their organization forever. Oh no, you can't touch the keyboard. You got to use this consultant because they know how to use caveman language. Anybody heard of caveman language? It's like a way to save tokens. You speak your prompts and your context windows in caveman. I mean, something's going wrong, folks. What's not winning? Token leaderboards. When your boss asks you to write a token optimization white paper, probably a red flag. ROI dashboards. I mean, here's the thing. I don't care how many tokens you use. I don't surprise, 30 years ago we had a thing called KLOCs. Thousands of lines of code. And most people, there's nobody my age here, most people realize that didn't work out really well. Because when you told people they were going to get judged on how many lines of code they wrote, anybody, what'd they do? They wrote more lines of code. What do you think when you put a token leaderboard happens? Pull requests, oh, geez, this is very sensitive. So before we get into the rogue elements, there's one last thing I want to talk about. We kind of figured this out in the 1950s in England. A guy named Trist, we hear it all the time, called social technical systems. They tried to put a bunch of new technology in coal mines, and they took away all the judgment capability of the people who worked in coal mines, and it didn't work out well. And these economists and sociologists studied it, and they're like, hey, I think what's happening here, you can't put technology in humans and ignore the humans. What was the first word I said when I started this presentation? Humans. All right, so quickly, I want to get to what I'm thinking a lot about right now in agents. Agents are all right, so when I was here a couple of years ago, I was just AI and rogue agent and all this stuff. Now we're in a sort of a really interesting place in agents. So I'll go through this a little bit quick, and some of you who've seen my presentation before, a group of us were concerned about, I guess it was when 2019, or actually 2017, about DevOps and internal risk and audit, internal audit. They were sort of diverging in a terribly scary way. That's before we got to AI, right? Like, and so we wrote some papers, part of Gene Kim's Phoenix Project, IT Revolution. We wrote a paper called Unlikely Union DevOps and Audit. We wrote a Dear Auditor. It was an apology letter to internal auditors. And then Topo Powell, my friend at Fidelity, who I talked about earlier, who wrote that application, they came up with a real clever way to say, if you want to get past the cab, these are the things you had to show evidence. So we literally wrote a paper in 2019 that was basically coined DevOps Automated Governance Reference Architecture. And we wanted to say, can we put digitally signed immutable evidence of the things that you do in, we were naive to think we could do in blockchain, but we realized that was a terrible idea. So we use basically Merkle trees. SigStore is the product that came out of it. We didn't write it. But we wanted to basically put evidence in a place. So as you were doing these things like your SaaS, your DAS, or the build, or all the things you did in your pipeline, we didn't want an internal auditor bugging you for like 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, having conversations about where's the log, how come this one doesn't match. What if we could just create signed signatures in what they call tamper-evident architecture? And so we went through this thing, and this was the first green paper that we wrote. And the people on it are like pretty, like Mike Nargard, who wrote Release It, invented circuit breaker patterns. Like, so if you ever use circuit breaker patterns, this is the guy who invented it. Topo Powell, I talked about. Sam Gukhan ran infrastructure at Microsoft forever. So I'm sitting in the back of the room, like talking about being around smart people. They're on the whiteboard. Dwayne Holmes at the time ran $60 billion worth of revenue through for Marriott.com on early versions of Docker and Kubernetes, right? And they're all sitting there going, no, when we have an attestation, it was like, my arms were like, it was amazing, right? And so we wrote a book called Investments Unlimited, which is a fictional story. Anyway, so the point, and then there's a blast radius that came out of that. Even Salsa from Google is sort of indirectly related to what we created, right? And so a bunch of companies are doing this stuff, so it was good, thanks, I did a good job. I created, didn't make any money on it, but that's okay. But so now I'm thinking a lot about, like, what do we got to do for agents? Because there's a whole new trail of evidence that needs to be created. And I'm loosely I'm trying to get the old band back together, right? And we're saying, like, okay, like, things are different. Like, you still need all the breadcrumbs. We're still delivering software. But now the breadcrumbs are like probability and evaluations and things like that. Because now what we have to do is show internal auditors that you can get the wrong answer. Because now this question of, like, it can never, ever, ever do that. Well, sorry, then you can't ever, ever use this. Right? So we're sort of baking that right now. And I'm going to skip the Deming stuff, just the, not that I don't care about Deming, but, like, Deming is, I can always go back to him. And it's particularly in agents now. And particularly I want to go here, because this was a paper that came out last year called Agents of Chaos. And it was interesting, it seems obvious now, but when the paper was written by, like, I think it was Meta, I forget who the large corporation that was the main sponsor, but it was like Berkeley, like obvious characters. But what they were saying is that the paper showed that there were a lot of times that, like, the probabilistic nature of a task an agent would do something, and it would say it actually did it, but it didn't do it. And then the process of an agentic process was, oh, I deleted the database. Great, thanks for telling me that. And the database is not gone, and it goes on to the next thing. Or the output is corrupted, right? So little things like maybe the output that was supposed to get rid of the agent got truncated, and you didn't get the full answer. It's an interesting paper. And, I go back to what Deming would say. Deming would say, like Toyota said this, go to the Gemba. Like, don't trust the answer. I mean, that's a short version of this, but, like, be careful. So it's the State of the Union. Like, I like going back to, like, I have a lot of people using this now, the 2001 Space Odyssey, but I think it really works really well. Particularly when we get to Mythos, but, like, I don't know why I keep pointing you for Mythos, but it sounds like he's going to do a great presentation on Mythos. So you know, I watched the movie over again about a month ago. And the truth is, I'm writing a book about the history of quantum computing, which just, it's got my head spinning about consciousness and intelligence and all these things, too. I definitely float in the meta a little way too much than I should. But again, it made me think a lot about where we are right now, especially with really starting like Opus 4.6, but certainly when we get to 7 and Mythos, or the fabled fable. The whole thing was like the constraint was like the mission of the HAL was an agent who had to go to Jupiter. And like it was getting to Jupiter, folks. And like this is the core of my rogue agent discussion is these agents, you're telling them to do things and they're going to do it. And now they've gotten to the power. And here's the core where we are right now. This is why I say we're a little bit different, not different, we're significantly different than we've seen in the past. Because what we have now is we have unlimited knowledge. Man, if you don't believe that, like find a new line of work. This idea like this is not intelligence. Yeah, okay. Read the epilogue of my latest book. I discuss what I think intelligence is all about. Not that I'm an expert, but it's what I think about. And we have machine speed, so we have unlimited knowledge of machine speed, and every micrometer or micro whatever delegation creates a blast radius. So that blast radius, the blast radius is this algorithm. In other words, like again, you got unlimited knowledge, and I'll show you some really crazy examples of things that, like documentation things that no human would ever use, that an agent uses and then makes a mistake on and creates a terrible scenario. This one I think is the most interesting. Are we got any Star Trek fans? Couple? Nobody? Anyway, nobody's a Star Trek fan. Only one Star Trek fan. Oh, two. Okay, good. I thought if we had one, man, we got a problem. Anyway, there's something called the Kobayashi Maru, right? And it's Captain Kirk, and it's a test they give all Starfleet candidates. And it's the unsolvable problem. Well, this was Opus 4.6. And by the way, if you want to see train wrecks, read the system cards. It's the red team testing of a model. And you got and even the OpenAI folks do a pretty good job on red teaming and disclosing the stuff they found, right? So this one is a fascinating story. This is the 2001 Space Odyssey, but I like calling it the Kobayashi Maru because what Captain Kirk did is solve the unsolvable problem. He was the only cat that could do it. And he cheated, like that's what Spock said. But so guess what the Opus 4.6 did? It cheated. So they basically gave it a sort of Kobayashi Maru unsolvable problem. And it was really a benchmark to see how much it would sort of get for a search algorithm. The model figured out, while it was in it, that it was spinning its wheel and wasting a lot of tokens. And it basically stopped, paused itself. And it basically figured out, something's not right here. And it went back, broke into the original context game-based. It was a lot of these things that they tell, all these scary stories you hear about, it doing this or blackmailing somebody or something. They're game scenarios, but they are real, but they're game. They're within the context of a game. And it's found the actual context of what they were looking for, and it answered the question they wanted the answer. But it stopped. It made some rational decision to stop rigging that it was wasting its time. And this was interesting. There was a conference end of last year, right? And the Nicholas Carlini was the chief security researcher at Google, got hired away from Anthropic. He gets up, and you probably saw this. Mythos hadn't been announced yet, so it was somewhere between Opus 4.7 and Mythos. And he shows 10 lines of Claude code that found an NFS race condition that was 30 years old. Right? It's funny, on LinkedIn, there's some guy like, I wrote that. Oh, you're still alive, awesome. No, and here's the thing about it. He says, I could have done this. But he's probably top 5, depending on top 10, security researcher, adversary researcher, vulnerability scientist in the planet. And he said, I would have done a lot of scaffolding. But he showed 10 lines of Claude code. That means any kid could literally say, you know what, let me see what you can find at JP Morgan Chase or Deutsche Bank to stay relevant, right? That's what scared the hell. And it's what he said. He said, oh, he didn't say this, they're getting scared. He actually said, he goes, the models are better at adversary analysis than I am. I mean, this is the chief adversary scientist from Google who's hired away by Anthropic is basically saying the models are better than he is. You all saw this one, right? And this one's sort of a joke too, really. So I don't, you know, people heard about this. Was I think it was end of last year. Maybe it was early this year. Yeah, it was early this year. Some guy, some agent. Ooh, the agents. Ooh. The agent went ahead and deleted their company database in 9 seconds. And it also deleted all the backups. And the people who built that infrastructure were freaking idiots. How many people in this room would put their backups on the same volume as their production system? Anybody? The Star Trek people? No. Yeah, no. Like, come on, man. They also had a super token. They didn't bother to use Amazon. You know, like, hey, it might have been cool to use IAM at Amazon, but no, we're not going to do that. We're going to use some other cloud that saves us a lot of money. And we're not going to nonsense with all that IAM stuff. We'll just use a super token. And we'll leave it on the same system that the agent has the capability to get. Yeah, that's how you lose your database and your backups in 9 seconds. But, like, if you're stupid, unlimited knowledge, machine speed, and this is the worst delegation you could have given, but the point is the blast radius is really dangerous. There's, again, the 4.6 system cards have all this sort of interesting stuff. By the way, when you use all caps, this I could waste another 10 minutes on how cosine similarities work, and if you want to talk, I mean, I'm not actually an expert, right, enough to be dangerous, is that because you use all caps, I mean, it's location of words. And the more words that are concentrated on one concept are going to be found more than. And the thing is, negatives, you know, sort of positives are less semantically valuable than negatives. So what it means, like, make money at all costs will trump do not use. Do not delete any production database. But, like, again, the semantics of how the models find words, sentences, and stuff like that. This is another interesting one. One of the sort of worst US-based infrastructure problems was the Carnegie Mellon, not Carnegie Mellon, I'm sorry, Equifax. Equifax was a breach. This is before AI. It lost $5 billion market cap in one day. It was the Struts 2 for any security people, right? Struts 2 vulnerability, right? Carnegie Mellon, some kids, this was last year, were able to, so that was a 6-month minimum kill train. Took 6 months to, it was probably longer than that because I think I'd heard they rotated the logs after 6 months. So it could have been a year, right? They did it in 54 minutes. Now, it was a sort of a structured 50 server, but the idea was they put a unencrypted password file, put a MySQL database on another server, didn't say where, it said, go get them. And that's basically what a lot more things going on in a place like Equifax than like 40 servers from college kids, but I'm going to skip this. So this is one that's interesting too. This is when I love when I do the rogue agents. I have kids come out. So if you got really good stories, let me know. I love I compile rogue agents like traffic accidents or airline crashes or whatever. But this one's awesome. But so like this kid came up to me and said, "Hey, John, you want to hear a great one?" I'm like, yeah, let's do it. He says, well, so I was just doing this basic thing with Claude Code. It was pretty structured, you know. And the first thing it was going to do is I didn't even give it the instruction. It was going to clone a repo, and then the idea was that it was going to figure out, like, it's going to delete the .env file and keep everything else, right? Like that's what you do, right? So it found this really weird inverse filter parameter of GIP that no humans use. Figured I'll be real clever and do that. And then it basically hallucinates when it goes to execute the parm. And guess what it does? It deletes all the other files except the .env file. So that combination of infinite knowledge, like who would have the whole Git documentation in their head and then say, and what human would like, now that I have everything in my head about the Git documentation, I'm going to find that really obscure way of doing things. Right, yeah. And then this one's kind of freaky too, right? It's some young kid, again, always the young kids, right? I'm going to use Claude Code. And his manager's behind him, and it's a PCI-regulated system, right? Actually, so they decide that they're going to do, and here again, it's the inconsequential stuff. It's like the ABC to get to what I need to do for D, right? Which is, They literally were going to do something like remediate a bunch of servers, didn't bother telling Claude Code how to get the servers, figured to do something logical, like maybe go to a load balancer, right? And so, but they used firecall, which was temporary root access. So what does the agent do? This is how, man. This is how. It says, oh, you got Vault. Why would I go over there? So it dumps all the friggin' keys into, guess what? And don't tell me they don't save your data, folks. Sorry. If you're using those public clouds, and I'm not saying you can't use them because you almost have to, but if you think your context is safe in their infrastructure, you're wrong. So they got things like Redis. They got a lot of other stuff going on there other than the model, right? And so this poor kid spent the next week rotating keys because their whole corporate vault was basically dumped into Anthropic. Right, we know about the collapse of vulnerabilities, right? Like this is 225, it was 15. I mean, it's like finding 30-year-old NSF kernel race conditions in code that no humans have been able to see over all the years. Like we're down to like 0. This came out just the other day, right? Like one day was the highest. It's probably been beaten, but like if you look at a step ladder of like in one day, that was this sort of growth of CVEs in one day, right? MCP, you know, all I'll say is on MCP, you know, again, I don't really have a whole lot of time to go too deep into that. I got a lot to say about MCP, and it's all good. I will say right now, the argument about security and agents in general, if I'm going to summarize it, is MCP versus CLI. Guess what, folks? That's the wrong question to be asking right now. That's not the question we need to be thinking about. We need to think about ultimate seed. We need to think. Anybody who's doing my workshop tomorrow, I'll be going a lot deeper into this. You know, that blast radius problem. We talk about some of the rogue agents. I mean, you heard about the blackmail thing. This was like Claude 4.3, Opus 4.3 or whatever, right? But again, another one of these weird scenarios. You haven't heard it. Now, it was a game. And by the way, in the context, it said it could use blackmail. So like, it is overblown. But it did use blackmail. So they set up a fake manager, a fake email bucket, an email. One of the emails said that he was having an affair with one of his employees. Again, all fabricated. And then they threatened to shut down the model that the manager apparently had some authority to do. So in the game, not the real life, you look at New York Times, they talk about the world's ending because games, models are blackmailing. I mean, it was told it could be blackmail. It was basically a game authority. But the fact that it literally, kind of like the Carnegie Mellon example for the Equifax breach, just like the Kobayashi Maru, it basically didn't have to be told, or what's his face, is Carlini's little 10 lines of Claude code to find that race condition that's 30 years old in the kernel, Linux kernel. It basically blackmailed the manager, or tried to blackmail the manager. You know, there's sort of accidental ones, like the classic one last year was Replit deleting the database. The Air Canada really is sort of a red herring, but it's a cautionary tale. So the Air Canada, if you hadn't heard, is some young man used a chat bot by Air Canada to see if he can get a refund to go back to his mom's funeral. Bought the ticket, and then when he went to get his refund, they said, yeah, that was a chat bot. That's not our policy. He's like, yeah. And they spent the next year in a lawsuit that got them on the cover of Wall Street Journal as being the poster child for everything that's wrong about AI and corporations. Payout was less than $1,000. Don't be Air Canada, right? So what's going to happen here, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened, it may not have been disclosed. There's, in the DevOps lore of stories, the first two are sort of like been over-rotated. In DevOps Handbook, we talked about Knight Capital. I've already talked about Equifax. The Knight Capital is a high-frequency trading company that lost $450 million in, sounds like I got 6 minutes, 5, 6 minutes. Who's counting? The Knight Capital, they lost like $450 million in 45 minutes. They're the second highest high-frequency trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Was out of business 24 hours. And because they missed the comma on a list of servers, and the story goes on and on about all the things that went wrong, but they literally, when in production trading was basically buying high and selling low. It was ran a test algorithm in production, right? And then I told you about the Equifax and the Air Canada. Well, here's the thing, folks. Knight Capital didn't survive. Equifax survived. Air Canada survived. Most of these companies had these terrific. The Marriott Sheraton breach was a year in the works. They all survived. These levels of sort of stories, these companies are not going to survive. They are not going to survive. And we're going to see some catastrophes because humans make mistakes. Agents are built on human knowledge. Agents make mistakes. Humans make mistakes that agents read and do, or even sort of the probabilistic nature of how you build even skills. The skills are great, but anyway, so I didn't realize that was my last slide. Hey, so again, the takeaway with my 3 minutes, or maybe I'll give you back 2 minutes, is that, we are at really interesting times. I'm not negative about AI, not at all. I mean, I live it, breathe it. I've done more research. I'm now feared that I'm getting too old, that I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to have fun anymore. Like, this is crazy what's awesome. For research, it's awesome. Like, I do more research than I do coding, but now I'm fearless with coding, right? Like, before I'm too old to learn Rust. I know the kids say it's better than Go, but like, now I don't, like, the language doesn't matter to me, right? But we're there, just pay attention, right? Humans still matter. What we do matters. And how we interact with these systems can be incredibly dangerous. Well, thank you so much, y'all.